Hi everyone, good afternoon, and thank you for joining the 16th session of the Podium Tech Talk series organized by Asiata Digital Labs. So, in this series, we explore the latest trends in the world of technology and digital transformation from our very own tech experts and the services ADL provides that accelerate the global rate of digital transformation. In today's session, the spotlight shines on the captivating theme of design for all, unleashing the power of inclusive creativity. This discussion centers around the profound impact of inclusive design, highlighting how creativity flourishes when it embraces diversity and caters to a broad spectrum of users, needs, and perspectives. Guiding us through this insightful journey is Devin De Mel, a user experience and user interface engineer and a distinguished lecturer at the University of Moratuwa. Devin's journey is marked by academic excellence, having earned a Bachelor of Design from the prestigious University of Moratuwa. With a wealth of practical experience in user experience and user interface engineering and a deep rooted understanding of design principles, Devin bridges the gap between theory and real world application, aligning his expertise perfectly with the essence of today's discourse. Now, as we delve into the heart of design, I hand over the reins to Devin De Mel. Let's embark on a thought provoking exploration of how inclusive creativity transforms the design landscape under Devin's insightful guidance. So, over to you, Devin. You can start now.
Hello. Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Uh, I'm Devin De Mel, and hope you all can see my screen as well.
Yeah, we can see it as well.
Okay. So, first of all, I want to thank you all for joining this podium session. And also, I want to thank ADL and the podium team for giving me this opportunity to talk about and share some knowledge on a topic which is I'm also very much passionate about. And as you may all have seen the post, and also it is mentioned in this slide, and Tiana also gave a really nice explanation of what I'm going to talk today, which is inclusive design and designing for all. So in this session, I'm going to take you through what is inclusive design and how to unleash the power of incorporative inclusive design into your creative process. Uh, Before everything else, let me ask you a simple question, which is actually a general knowledge question. What is the entire population of the Earth? Is there anyone who has an answer? You can use the chat box if you may. Uh, so it is actually around 7.4 billion people, uh, which is a lot of people, right? So since I've mentioned designing for all, am I going to talk about designing for 7.4 billion people? We'll see. Okay. So do all the 7.4 billion of us identical to each other? That's another question I'm asking. If you're willing to give an answer, you can. So my answer is actually no. That's a huge no, right? So because when you talk about, personalities, appearance, and our behavior patterns, everything is different from each other. Like this. This is an example of appearance actually. other than the appearance, we have different personalities and we have different identities. We have different sexual orientations. We have different behavioral patterns. We come from different backgrounds. We believe in different things. We believe in religions. We speak different languages. So even the most identical twins have different traits and some different attributes from each other. So that's why the world is so beautiful because of the diversity. All of us are different from each other. So this aspect itself lay the groundwork to my topic today. Uh, so the case of inclusive design. So this itself creates the need for inclusive design without excluding anyone from this spectrum of diverse people. So as designers or product designers, engineers, and product related people who develop great products, who we actually design for. So in my personal experience, I think most of you all can relate to this as well. We start from our own abilities and biases, right? That is a starting point. And then we sort of specify people into personas, or we empathize on a specific target audience, and then we specify their gender and according to their age, language ability, tech literacy, physical ability, and what is the amount of money they have access for, and the network access and everything else, right? We sort of frame personas and we create a persona for like people, and then we adhere to that, and then we design according to that persona. I'm not saying that's wrong. That is perfectly right, because that is the design process. We start from empathizing. But when we do that, we actually exclude something, exclude a enormous portion of humanity. Because as I mentioned, we all are diverse from each other. We have, different backgrounds, and everything is different from one to another. So is there such thing called normal? How can we define normal if we are so diverse from each other? So, and also the interactions we design with technology heavily dependent on our five senses, right? What we see, hear, say, touch, and smell. So if we, as designers, if we assume that all those senses and abilities are fully enabled and fully functioning, we actually ignore a range of humanity. That is something as designers and engineers we commonly do, but we can actually, there are things we can improve in our processes with inclusive design. So why inclusive design matters? That comes from my previous statements itself, because designing for inclusivity not only opens up our products and experience to more people with a wider range of abilities, because when we keep inclusivity in mind, we can actually design our products even within the target audience we have used. We can reach each and every one within the target audience as well. And also it reflects how people really are. As I mentioned earlier, people are diverse and all humans are growing, changing, and our personalities change within our growth and time to time. And we are adapting to the world every day. And we have adapted to the world, and we will adapt to the changing, ever-changing world in the future as well. So that helps, that actually, like inclusive design actually helps us to reach all those aspects of humanity, because humanity is different and diverse. Within inclusive design, there's something we cannot actually ignore, which is accessibility. Accessibility is a word. I mean, a lot of people who are in the IT industry and who build tech products might have an idea of what accessibility is, and you might be using accessibility guidelines. I'm assuming that you guys use that. So accessibility in design refers to the practice of creating products, experiences, environments, or systems which are actually usable and understandable by a wider range of people, including people with different abilities and impairments. So the goal of accessibility is basically is to ensure that everyone, regardless of their physical, cognitive, sensory, or technological capabilities, they can effectively interact with and benefit from a design. So basically, that is what accessibility is. Accessibility can be identified as an attribute we practice as designers and developers, where we uh, kind of ideate and design a product, and then we try to uh, fill the gap of accessibility, to incorporate accessibility to reach into a wide range of people. And there are so this is a chart that has been created by Microsoft to understand the link between usability, accessibility, and inclusive design. So usability is basically the principles that ensure we ensure that interacting with a product, content and functionality is intuitive and efficient and enjoyable as possible. So we actually think, as designers and developers, we think about usability aspects very much. And then comes accessibility, which is a guideline to ensure that users can access the content in a product, or the functionality in the product, regardless of their physical development or impairments. So inclusivity comes in between the sweet spot of usability and accessibility, where inclusivity is a methodology that inclusivity or inclusive design is a methodology that ensures the product or the content or the functionality the designers designed for all people to have the ability to engage with. So this also kind of expand into the main difference between accessibility and inclusive design. Accessibility is an attribute. It's a checklist we kind of adhere into our design process to make our design or our uh, product more accessible to a lot of wider range of people. On the other hand, inclusive design is a methodology which help us to create an inclusive experience without excluding anyone in the selected audience or in the spectrum of humanity. So let's deep dive into accessibility a little bit. So as I mentioned earlier, accessibility recaps to the qualities that make an experience open to all. And accessibility, there it's also can be identified as a professional discipline that aimed of achieving the above point, which is the qualities that makes an experience open to everyone within the audience. So when we talk about everyone, so so in the design process, sometimes we exclude people with impairments. So there are four examples for this. When you think about touch, a person with one arm only have one arm to do his or her daily tasks. So a person who has a temporary injury, who has an arm injury, also have one arm. And a new parent who's carrying a baby from one arm is also having one arm, one disposable arm to do their tasks. So the importance of incorporating accessibility into our products will help the person who we actually thought of in the beginning of the process, that is the one person who's with an one arm. So it will also help the person who has a temporary injury, uh, an arm injury, and also a person in a situation that could only use one arm. So when you go to another example, when you talk about hearing, we think about deaf people, right? So think about deaf people, and we have created closed captions for deaf people to see what is actually to read what is going on in a video or an instruction. So it will also help for a person who has a temporary ear infection, and also a bartender who is in an environment where there's a huge noise and he can't hear anything else. So incorporating accessibility into a design process will help a wider range of people, not only the people we are actually keep in mind when we creating or incorporating the accessibility aspects into. Uh, So these are there are a lot of digital standards of accessibility, starting from Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG 2.2, that is the most updated guideline. You can go to this link and actually go through the whole guideline. So this is authored by the World Wide Web Consortium and is the most comprehensive benchmark for accessibility. So in this guideline, there are design guidelines which affects the use of type, craft, the page layouts and employ animations and transitions. And also there are content guidelines which affects on the content in the product, and also code guidelines which also affects the development of the product. So there are three basic, standards, starting from A standards, which can be achieved by achieving the minimum requirement of somewhat accessible to audience with impairments. And there's double A standards, which affects the acceptable level of desktop and mobile that is usable and supports for assertive technology. And the triple A standard is the higher standards, which has a potential to incur additional cost and scope to fully implement. So as designers and as product engineers, we try to at least achieve the double A standards, which is actually advisable. So if you can go towards a triple A standard by giving something more, giving like, doing a little bit more uh, work. So that is also going to be amazing for your product. So since we talked about accessibility, I'll take you through 8 factors which will help to make a product more accessible. Starting from maintaining appropriate contrast between text and background it sits on. So this is basically, I'm talking about accessibility in the point of UI, user interface design point of view. So starting from the text. So I've taken example from material design guideline, which is a design guideline provided by Google. So as you can see here, there is in the left area, you can see the wordings and the background. It's the contrast works perfectly fine. In the right side, you cannot actually read anything. So even in the below area where you can see icons on a background. So this is something you can practice, because the contrast between the background and the text has to be very clear. So anyone with even minor visual impairment can see what's on your screen. So other thing is touch targets. So since we are using touchscreen mobile devices, uh, keeping the touch targets in a very convenient space is very important. So the touch targets has to be large enough and has to have adequate space in between them. So these are the uh, minimum and the ideal target spaces, spacings from pixel, and also the minimum spacing between touch targets. So as you can see here, this is also an example from material design guideline. So in the avatar, you can see the touch target has been 48 pixels, and there's adequate space kept between the icon in the search icon, and also in the right side corner, you can see uh, dialog box where you have two touch targets called agree and disagree, and there's adequate space in between them as well. And font size is another important thing. So the font sizes of text blocks or paragraphs has to be readable across all the devices, starting from web to mobile. So basically, as UI designers, we use as 14 point as the minimum font size, and the ideal would be 16 to 18. And we don't go below 11 point, because even though there are some instances, some design guidelines have gone beyond the minimum size of a font, but so it is advisable to be in this spectrum according to WCAG guideline. And the other thing is the use of language in call to actions mainly. So when you use language, you have to be concise and to be specific and simple. So to elaborate more on that, so you have to prioritize on the essential details, and we have to use short, scannable phrases rather than long sentences. And we have to use an active language to tell the user what happens after they interact. So we have to avoid using, general phrases like submit, click here, and try to avoid next as well. So, and also we have to keep things simple as possible. Use use words that are direct and can be understood across any reading level, because we have, when it comes to English, there are people who have a beginner level of knowledge, and intermediate level of knowledge, and advanced level of knowledge. So the wordings we use on our products has to be convenient for the person who is in a beginner level as well. So that is also a way we can make it more accessible. So as an example, you can see here, this is a dialog box which has a very simple saying called pictures already exist. Try another name. So in this, the right below dialog, there's a long sentence. Can't rename the picture because of a file or a folder with that name already exists, and specify a different name. So this takes a huge cognitive load from the users. So, and also you can see the text size has to be reduced and a lot of problems. So keeping it simple makes it very easier for users with different backgrounds and different impairments. And there are some more examples, like, using uh, click to continue. It is very easy because you can use it. There's only two words rather than click the continue buttons. Why use, like, four words when you can communicate it simply by two words? And that is a way to use the language in your designs and your products, adhering to uh, accessibility guidelines. And this is another thing, adding alternatives text for images and non-text assets, because some of us don't have the perfect internet connection. which is very powerful. We don't have the same bandwidth within the world, so sometimes the images and the non-text assets won't be loading as fast as they can. So because of that, we should always try to include alternative text which is valuable and which communicates what's the text image or the non-text access asset is. And other than that, if you are using videos in your product which communicates something very crucial to your product, then we should definitely use closed captions to that, because a person with hearing impairment might miss a very crucial point of your design or a product. And also, uh, we have primary actions and secondary actions in user interfaces. So we should try to like use more than one design factor or a design element to make primary actions more apparent. So we can use these kind of variants like text weight, shape, color, text styling, sizes, and iconography to make that primary actions apparent as possible. And also the users need to know where they are going. The navigation and the progress cues needs to be clear and consistent. And the most prominent example for that is steppers. So using steppers in a very, steppers in processes and uh, flows where there are multiple stages, it's definitely value adding to the users, and to like get a gist of where they are and how many steps they need to complete to complete the task. So those are and also errors. So clearly communicate errors when they occurs. So actually material design guideline has nailed this with this text input. They have, a helper text, error message, icons, and a character count. So there are more than one. There are more than one possible ways for the user to identify errors. So that is also something very important when we consider accessibility into our user interfaces. So after accessibility, let's talk about principles of inclusive design. So according to Microsoft, so they have done extensive research on inclusive design. So according to Microsoft, there are three principles of inclusive design, starting from recognize of exclusions, and learning from diversity, and solve for one and extend to many. So what is recognizing exclusions? Basically, I've talked about exclusion before in my presentation as well. Exclusions happen when we solve problems using our own biases. So when we assume that everyone has the same ability. With that assumption, we exclude a lot of people who has different abilities and different backgrounds and who speak different languages than us. So that is the place where we actually do exclusions in our design process. So when we recognize those exclusions, it will help us to create an inclusive experience for everyone. So when we talk about disability, so it is mainly known as a personal health condition. So at the realm of inclusive design, it could be identified as a mismatched human interaction. So when we identify and recognize exclusion, we can sort of clear out this mismatch and match the human interactions with each other, with the product and with each other, with including the disabled person as well. So learning from diversity. So in the previous slides, I talked about people adapting, changing, and also people are different from each other. So human beings are actually the real experts of adapting to diversity and changing world. So what we can do is as inclusive designers, we have to always try to identify those points where people adapt and the points where the world change. So keeping that in mind will help us to create our products inclusive as possible. So this is the most important and interesting point. Solve for one, extend to many. So by focusing on what's universally important to all humans, is the base of inclusive design, as we can identify throughout what I have mentioned in this presentation. So, so in inclusive design, we actually think about people who uh, have people as diverse beings, and we try to include everyone into our design process, even though we start from a point where we empathize a user group. But within that user group, we try to identify what could be the exclusions. And then we think about focusing on the people or the humans that could be excluded from our product or from our design. So we try to solve, we try to design or solve, uh, keeping that person who keeping that exclusions in mind, which will actually help a lot of other people within the user group or the target group of our product. So, as an examples, constraints, the beauty of the constraints. So when we design something, when we design a product, or when you think about a person who has a hearing impairment, who has a who has a very go through hardships of hearing. So for that, the world invented this thing called closed captioning. So closed captions were created for people with hearing impairments, and it actually helped it actually helped a lot of people in the community, starting from people who are in a crowded place, such as airport, would never be able would have a hardship of hearing the announcements. Will actually can read the closed captions or the captions of the announcement. And also, this is the other example I'm going to take is learning or teaching a child to read. This is very relatable because as Sri Lankans and as people from Southern Asia or Asian countries, we try to watch TV shows or movies with captions, which will help us in improving our English, improving our reading skills, and improving even our speaking skills. So this closed captioning actually started with a person who has with hearing impairment, but it helped a lot of people uh, within the spectrum of humanity. So that is the beauty of constraints. And when you take another example, a person with an one arm. So if we have designed a device, so the most prominent example I can take is in most of the Android devices or the Samsung devices, they have created this one-handed mode, which has been created for the people who has actually one for the to do their tasks. So a person with an arm injury actually use that option in that mobile phone to use the mobile phone, use all the functionalities of the mobile phone from the one hand he has because of the arm injury. And a new parent who has to carry their baby from one hand also can use that options in that Android device. So different people can benefit from inclusive design when we think about the fundamentals of including everyone into the into our design or into our product. We can actually expand it towards a lot of other people, to help a lot of other people in, temporary situations, and also in situations where they have to, they need assistance, or they need a digital assistant than, doing it in the so-called normal way. So this is actually a stat from the United States Census Bureau, Limbs for Life's Foundation. So when we design a device for a permanently one-handed person, that would be only around 26,000 people. And there would be more than 13 million people who has temporary injuries, arm injuries, who could use that device for their help. And there's situational states where people such as new parents who also need this assistant, that could be around 8 million people. So the total people is 21 million and more. So more people can benefit from inclusive design rather than the people actually we design for. And inclusive design is all about the mindset. So uh, being inclusive starts with changing our perception. So as designers, we practice human-centered design and user-centered design. We do it really well, and we know how to empathize a user and create personas and then test it with the user. We go on this process, right? So but if you set the mindset of, how to reduce exclusion, how to include everyone within the human spectrum to our design process, and then there's a lot of methods and tools designed and developed by a lot of companies, a lot of organizations, we can actually make our design process more inclusive and include more people into our product. So we talked about personas in the earlier slide. So rather than focusing on one persona, we can focus on a persona spectrum. So a persona who has permanent impairment or permanent disability and temporary, and also situational problems where they need assistance. So these are few examples, like uh, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation. So rather than sticking into one persona, we should expand into a persona spectrum to include more people into our designs. So what are the benefits of inclusive design? So those are the three benefits actually, and there's many more. These benefits can be expanded into a wide range. So using inclusive design methodology in your design process will definitely increase access to your product or your design. So more people with different abilities and more people with diverse backgrounds and different, people who speak different languages can actually access if we send the inclusive design into our design process. And it will actually reduce friction because we by incorporating inclusive design, we reduce friction points such as language barriers and visual barriers and hearing barriers, because we are including a lot of things to our design process to make our product inclusive as possible. And also we can, relate more on the emotional context, where a lot of people with a lot of backgrounds and diverse set of people can actually connect with our product, and our product will be uh, in a wide range of product would be wide in a wide range where people can actually interact, and people can a lot of people can actually use and get value out of your product. So that is the most amazing benefit of inclusive design. So as a final point, I would like to say, as designers, uh, what we can do is we design to embrace the things that makes us human, right? So it is what drives us to create the world, a better world that makes better lives. So, as designers, if we incorporate inclusive design into our design process, we can actually achieve this. We can actually drive the world to make lives better, and we can actually create products that includes the spectrum of humanity, spectrum of diverse human beings, where people with different backgrounds and different interests and different uh, identities can, come together and like get value out of your product. So inclusive design is something really important in the world now. And I think as designers, engineers, and who build great products, we can actually incorporate inclusive design principles and methodologies to our design process. uh, thank you very much. That's it from me.